the typical touristic thing. So you would have to go part of their own culture, underground culture, and speak their own language, because the people selling it, if they speak English, they might just be able to say hello. That would be it. So you would have to speak a minimum of their tongue, and they each speak a different language. They speak a different language in Turkmenistan, and they do in Slovenian, and they do in Croatian, and they do, Ukraine is basically Russian, but do you speak Russian? Out of all those countries, even out of simply the whole of Eastern European countries, simply Eastern Europeans and not Central Asia, only the Russian by far, I guess Russia would be where most of those pieces have survived, because today, out of all those countries, Russia is the most wealthy, the biggest, the most centralized in one government and one culture, one people, and also back then it was the same thing. So the situation of Russia is the same situation, and back then Imperial Russia was the most wealthy place, where they had the highest percent of upper classes and upper middle classes, and all the world's people were dressed like that, in suits and all. Men would dress like that, and thus. But again, Russia has no eBay. eBay was meant to let Russia be part of eBay just before Russia set war to Ukraine. So obviously it has since then been banned from eBay. So all those local sites or local internet sites, I'm sure in Russia they have local Etsy's and stuff that are not named Etsy's or eBay, but that function the same way. They will not be available in Europe. If you know of those, you will have to speak Russian to type in there, and Russian is not like Italian at all. It has different letters. So how to do that? And likely they will no longer ship. They might ship to all those allied countries or all those neutral countries, or that used to be part of the Soviet Union, in other words, Eastern European countries and or Central Asian countries. Central Asian countries would be Turkmenistan, Georgia, Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, and other things, Tajikistan, and a few others I'm forgetting. All those weird Stan mini countries. But you would then have to be in one of those countries to get it shipped to you, because likely because of the war, Russian things will not be shipped to Europe. We said that to them, so they said that to us. They will not ship to you. So you would have at least, even if you don't want to be in Russia, you would have to be, well, Ukraine would be the worst place to be in now, but you would have to be in Georgia or Azerbaijan or whatever. So it becomes even more complicated. And not to get Georgian clothing, because that might be even more complicated, but simply to get Russian clothing shipped to you in Georgia and then bring it back in the plane with you to Britain or wherever it is you want to live. So, the situation now in Europe, what is commonly known as Western Europe. What actually is Western Europe, first of all? At least today, when we say Western Europe, we are talking about the following countries. I may miss some of them or a lot of them, but I'm not talking about the European. I'm talking geographically Western Europe. Has nothing to do with the European Union. So, Scandinavia. What is Scandinavia? Scandinavia is an alien. It used to be allied countries under one king, which now are separate countries. Those countries, in today's terminology, today those following countries. Iceland, the Kingdom of Sweden, because it has a king. Faroe Islands are actually part of the Kingdom of Sweden, so I will not count them as a country, and it is a tiny island. So, up to now, two countries: Iceland, the Kingdom of Sweden, Denmark, Norway, and I think I'm forgetting one, Finland. 5 countries. 5 of the wealthiest. These are the 5 in percent. As a whole, it is not the wealthiest country. That would be the United States of America. But in terms of the population, if you take all individuals from there, how rich they are altogether, these are the 5 wealthiest countries in the world that have ever been. Was it the same case in the 1890s or up till then? Not at all. They were actually relatively poor then. Especially for Norway and Iceland, and maybe not Sweden, but also, not about Finland, but also Denmark. I think they were relatively, at least compared to Britain, Italy, Spain, Portugal, and France, and Germany and all. I think they were poorer. Also, their culture was more like in Eastern Europe and all, in that it had less modernized and it was more a peasant culture, actually a fisher's culture, fisherman's culture, and not the culture of people going to jobs in factories or in offices, in other words, wearing suits. They were not really wearing suits, only a minority, because the middle class, upper middle class, and even more upper classes were even more microscopic in those places, and thus even less people wore that. And thus, because also what you have to think is that the working class still wore suits in Britain, especially in Britain, because they worked in factories, most of them. In France, they also had a lot of peasants that did or did not wear suits. When they did wear suits, they mixed it with local elements. But I'm talking first of all about Scandinavia. In Scandinavia, the culture still today, and especially back then, it was more or less the same throughout those 5 different countries. Even the language was more or less identical. They can still understand each other. So most of those pieces in Scandinavia have not survived because simply, as not really know the culture, they've banned after the people's death and all. I do not think so. But all I know is that only the middle, unlike in Britain, only the middle class and the upper middle and the, because I do count the upper middle as a bit of a separate class of its own, and the upper classes would have dressed like that. I'm not even sure they would all have dressed like that. Probably all the upper classes and upper middle would have dressed like that. I'm not sure all the middle classes would have. Simply like normal middle classes. In other words, low middle class and medium middle class would have dressed like that. I think only a few of those. And then, because it was so tiny, the percent of those people, I think, for example, in Iceland or in Sweden, is it Sweden or Iceland? No, in Sweden, I think, until 1900, 95% of the population was working class. 95 or more. So maybe only like 0.5 was upper class, another 0.5 upper middle, and then another like 4% middle class, super normal middle class. They were not. So very few, and also those places are practically empty. Until today, there are only a handful of millions. So you take all of Scandinavia, which is relatively big. If you take all those countries, it is way bigger than France. It has, all of those countries together have a way lower population than simply France or Britain itself. Imagine. And that was the same ratio back in the late 19th century. That meaning way less of those garments had been produced. Thus, because all of those mostly do not survive, as I explained, only the formal ones, only a few tiny microscopic percent of those garments and only formal ones have technically survived. I know some have survived because I know that Polish chap called, he's very young, his name is Timon Rupieckwicz, check his Instagram, historical fella. He managed to get a full suit. For his height, he's at least 6 feet tall. So a very tall suit would tell me for the era. Impeccable, new-like, and I helped him to date it. I spent an hour dating it. It most likely dates from 1900 to 1903. No, what did I say? No, I told him from 1895 older than that to 1901 max. 1900. But the styling is older for British suit because those people were behind. I had also established it was most likely an upper middle or middle class formal suit, not an upper class suit. So those people would have been even more further behind in terms of fashion, so a 5-year gap. So it is more like an English suit of 1890 to 1895, but actually I guess it is a bit newer than that. And he found it and he said it was from Sweden, and he only got it for a ridiculous sum of like 20 euros because a Swedish chap visiting him in Poland sold it to him. So he was very lucky. But he would tell me, how is it, out of all the only surviving pieces, how was it so big? Do not forget that in those countries, because of the diet and the race is the same than in Britain. But because the diet is much healthier, they only eat fish, and that diet has practically remained unchanged throughout since 200 years or more. They are the tallest countries on earth. So back then they were already the tallest people. So today the average height is 190, then it was 180. So the average height of then, although in Britain it was 165, it was probably 175 to 180 in Norway especially. It was the tallest country ever. Until today, I think, and then it was already. So in 1890, the average height in Norway was 185, or in other words, the average height of Britain today. So a modern Norwegian would not fit in those, probably, but a modern British or French person would likely fit in those. But again,